Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
Probably, I'd say Antwerp in 79. That was just, I say, all across the terraces. And then we started going, Everton were a bit shit at the time, so we started going to some England games, if some lads by us, because they were on the GRAFT then, there was lads from all over the country going away. And I remember Luxembourg about 81, 82 it might be. It was just the first time I've ever seen, not just the police, but the Luxembourg army got chased. England were just relentless, looted, fucking took everything that wasn't nailed down, trouble between themselves. Mental, absolutely mental. If that happened in this day and age, mate, it would be just headline news in every country in the world, the behaviour in them days. And I say nothing to be proud of. It was just how it was in them days.
Today we are looking at a subject some of younger football lads, or normal football lads, may not be aware of. Graft, or grafting. I'm not talking about what you 20-year-old lads that watch Love Island call grafting, chatting up birds by the pool in your flip-flops. I am talking about the type of graft that could earn you good dough, but with risks attached. Although, when we travelled abroad to some European cities, the locals were a bit oblivious and naive into how naughty us Brits could be. They were also unprepared initially too. Back in those days I had my own graft, which I talked about in one of my first videos, which I eventually got done for, but I did make a lot of money at the time, which funded my designer clothes and away day travel. As usual in our videos we are going to listen to accounts from proper lads that have done it all, so let's jump into what our first terrace legend had to say about his experiences of grafting. The following are all his own words. It wasn't long before I was locked up again because of football, but this time it had nothing to do with hooliganism. I was arrested for looting a sports shop. We got caught when one of the lads booted a football out of the shop and it set off the alarm. By the time we went to Antwerp, most lads were into the gear, and I mean the smart sports gear, not the brown stuff with needles that wrecked the city a few years later. Although I went to watch the match, most of the lads were just on the ale and the rob, and it was an education I will never forget. From that trip, I learned that if you came home with less money than you went with, you'd had a bad time. We were booked into the Holiday Inn, and it was too good for us, to be honest. They were foolish to let about 200 of us stay in there at the same time, and should have demolished it after we left, as it already had been partially dismantled by our good selves. All the rooms had false wardrobes, and if you took a panel out you were in the next room. I also know gangs of Everton and Liverpool lads who are the best robbers in the country. One time it took a firm weeks to plan and rob a major designer shop in town, but when they did, they cleared thousands. Would a couple of lads turn that down because the bloke who hijacked the dustbin lorry to carry the 50 sacks of swag away was a red? It isn't always as successful as that raid though. Another job was planned, and after 10 hours of chiselling a hole in the roof and breaking into a massive warehouse supposedly full of cigarettes, it turned out that the place was packed with sacks of salt. The lad who sorted that job, who we will call Peter, also turned up at my mate's shop with a blanket and opened it to reveal a huge chandelier. Peter thought it might be worth a few quid as scrap, and my mate kept it in his shed for a night. The next day, it was in the Liverpool Echo that it had been stolen from St. George's Hall while the hall was being painted, and that it was worth £1 million. They dumped it in the road, and the taxi driver that found it was a hero on Merseyside for weeks. The tickets are another top earner, but if the lads from both clubs could not work together, then it would mess it up for everybody, as at the first sniff of a kick-off, the chance of money would be gone. That also applies in Manchester, where half the touts at Old Trafford are ex-Man City lads. We all need money, and I am glad that when I fancy a few soft quid, I can earn it from the Reds. I found Switzerland the best place to visit, dead classy and easy pickings. Germany was always a bit moody, and Holland had too many other things going on to take you away from the shops. The blag rail cards that were the main form of transport had been sussed. The ramp for dodgy Visa cards was a distant memory and had been replaced by electronic anti-theft devices. Some of the worst trouble ever at an England match was at Luxembourg in the year 1983. It was one of the first times a big Manc firm turned out for an England game. There were still only a few Scousers there, but the Mancs had a massive mob, mainly United, but quite a few City as well. They had all come on the rob, as at the game previously in Switzerland quite a few had done very well out of the trip, and by all accounts, Luxembourg had even easier pickings. England, as one mob, turned the city over. There were gangs looting jewellers' shops, setting fire to cars, walking into bars, grabbing the tills and smashing them in the street. The army was called out in the end but was chased by a huge mob of mainly Chelsea. No messing, England had the Luxembourg army on its toes. Loads eventually got nicked, and a few Mancs did about 3 months jail. Everyone who had a bag with new clobber in got nicked, and had all the gear taken off them. The lads with the gear from Belgium and Luxembourg lost it all. Hundreds of pounds worth of sports clothes, jewellery and leathers. Rivalries never came into it for me. I was in it for the money and the laughs. So over the years I made good friends with a few Mancs and lads from other clubs who were on the same game. It was only the Cockneys that were not easy to get on with. They believed that they had the divine rights to everything, and were best to be given a wide berth if you wanted to earn dough and come home with it all. They were happy to let you graft all week, and then liberate you of all your swag on the way home. It wasn't as if you could go running to the old bill about it. I went on most of my grafts with a Manchester United lad. Once we got on the ferry, it was always to get straight onto the bandits and shackle every one of them with tie-wrap plastic strip, which was the most important tool of our trade. We had the bandits boxed off and used to do shifts on them. It was simple, but a top earner. You got your little piece of plastic wire and would rattle up 99 credits as fast as you could, whilst the other lads kept a lookout. It was risky, and you had to be fast, but also careful, as if you hit 100, it took you back to 0, and you had to start again. It was like having a wank, and getting overexcited, and shooting your load too quick. Bang bang bang, 96, 97, 98, 99, and oh crap, back to 0 and start again. We would then split up, leaving one lad playing the machine for nothing, while we set credits up on another. It may take an hour at the most, but with 100 credits, you nearly always crack the jackpot at least once on the crossing. Once the jackpot was hit, we would make our way to the bar, and an hour later, the machine would be full again, as there were so many people on the ship wanting to play them on the level. The soft lads were lining up our pockets, because, if they did win, they were usually empty, as the wire had been the only thing going in the coin slot. On a good crossing, we would get 3 jackpots on each machine, and they ranged from 20 quid to 50 quid, so we could pull in 400 quid on each crossing with ease. One Chelsea lad clocked us, and I will always remember him saying, "I like your style." I knew he was after a touch, and right on cue he added, "Give us a bit of that." He was fucked off, but it was on top, as we had no option but to walk around with duty-free bags full of coins while he followed us. We got to Belgium and straight into Ostend, and straight on the rob. We had no interest in anything else. It was a case of get into the shops and clear up with anything we could steal. It was no good, us trying to tag along with the firm, as we were not welcome, so we had to do our own thing. There was not much in Ostend, so we moved on to Bruges, where we met a load of Hull lads who were on a minibus. There were also a few hundred England fans in town, so we needed more space, as we had not come over there to sing daft England songs. We were here on business. We moved on to a smaller town not too far away. It was a great little town, bang on, and we took the place to the cleaners. We had that much stuff we could not carry it all, and were having to nick bags to put it in. We robbed those long designer padded leathers that were top quality, dead smart. We looked like the Mafia in them. We travelled right across Belgium, loads of daft little towns, stopping a night here and a night there, and robbing the places blind in the day. That account was from a Scouser, a top lad. Now I want you to listen to the stories from a Manchester United lad and a member of the intercity Jibbers. This is what he had to say about doing a bit of graft. Jibbing is a piece of Manx slang that means getting something for nothing. For a lot of people it's just a word, but for these lads it's a way of life. I had never really been into nicking things until I gained entry into this side of United's firm, although Gorton has always had its fair share of crooks. The world of professional jibber was something that I had only observed from a distance until I came across the ICJ. They were an elite squadron of pickpockets, sneak thieves and shoplifters who moved from one place to the next, stripping each town of its wealth along the way. The group of skilled moneymakers was quick to invite me to the fold, showing me the tricks of the trade and helping me to turn football hooliganism into a profitable activity. Some people thought that ICJ was the name of our entire firm, but it was more of a term we used to describe lads that wasn't afraid to break the law to earn a crust. It wasn't a mob in its own right, just a byword for United's criminals. The more I knocked about with them, the more I learned about thieving, until my trips eventually paid for themselves. One of the main advantages of being part of a mob is that a mass brawl is the perfect distraction for somebody on the graft. While everybody else was attempting to get out of the way of the off, the ICJ would help themselves to whatever it was that they wanted. One common tactic for having a shop till over was to deliberately start a fight so that we could jump over the counter and grab the cash. It was like taking candy from a baby. Another way of making a raise when mobbed up was to walk into a clothes shop and walk out with the stock in plain view of the security. There would be so many of us that nobody would say a thing. There was no such thing as CCTV back then, so you could get away with that type of jibbing a lot more easily. Nowadays you have to really know your stuff to really graft a shop. You're recorded everywhere you go, which means you have to plan it way in advance to stand any sort of chance. If there was a way of making money that was against the law, then the betting would be that somebody within the mob was doing it. Whether it was selling drugs, shoplifting or fraud, we funded our football, drink and drugs by doing whatever needed to be done. At the age of 15, an event took place that changed the way I grafted forever. I took a trip to mainland Europe to see United play Barcelona. It gave me my first taste of jibbing overseas, and I have never looked back. I nicked a load of beer and cigs on the ferry over, then spent my time in Europe looting the local shops. The shopkeepers on the continent was not as clued up than they were back in England, never suspecting a thing until I made off with all their stuff. From that day onwards, I travelled around Europe whenever I got the chance, and grafted my way through Spain, Holland, Switzerland, Germany and Luxembourg. My journeys abroad were like a holiday and a business trip all rolled into one. I would jib the train to Dover, jib the ferry across the continent, and then go wherever took my fancy. Amsterdam was like a home away from home for me. There was always loads of scallies from Manchester and Liverpool grafting over there, so there was plenty of English people for us to knock about with. The entire city was filled with brasses and vice as well. Rotterdam was at the opposite side of the spectrum. Amsterdam was a vibrant, cosmopolitan city filled with foreign tourists, but Holland's second city was run down, with a distinct air of menace. It must have had something going for it though, because when I heard that United was playing Barcelona in Rotterdam in the 1991 European Cup Winners' Cup final, I was determined to attend the game. I had been partying hard all weekend, and had left it right until the very last minute to get over. Luckily, a lad called G the Jib had a spare ticket for sale. I sold all the furniture in my house and handed over the proceeds in return for the brief. My missus at the time went mental, which was understandable, given how our home was stripped completely bare from wall to wall. I was praying that I would be able to earn enough while I was there to make it up to her once I arrived back in the UK. The coach took a full day and a half to get to Rotterdam, so I told the driver that I would be making my own way back. This caused me no end of problems because I was flat broke and there was no transport available. We won the game 2-1, with Mark Hughes scoring both of our goals. Ronald Koeman managed to get a consolation goal for Barcelona, but it wasn't enough to prevent us from winning the game. We were the first English team to win a European competition since our ban in 1985, which had me buzzing. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.